The system is really a representation of many, many years and many experts worth of work with respect to trying to improve the quality of care that practitioners such as ourselves provide. And we understand that there's a tremendous amount of complexity to the kind of medicine that we practice, the enormous amount of variables that we have to address, and really trying to personalize the care we provide to patients. It's an incredible challenge, actually, and I know that all of us are early adopters. We embrace this sort of challenge, and we often see the results of this kind of approach to care in our own practices. But with that being said, none of us can really keep up on all of the latest information, and none of us are good at everything. And so what this system is designed to do is to provide a point of care support for practitioners such as ourselves that are looking for real-time help with respect to organizing information, developing personalized care plans, and supporting our patients over time to be successful. Point of care really is sort of the word of the day when it comes to the metabolic code system, meaning that the data that's generated, the personalized profiles that are created, and the ongoing support that patients receive is all in real time. And so nothing is really rote. There's nothing kind of preformed in a sense. What this system does is actively aggregate data and use algorithms to identify where that individual is most imbalanced and to generate a plan that makes sense for that individual. The metabolic code system is really divided into two sides. One is the personalized assessment tool, and then the other is the lifestyle guidance portal. I'll be talking a bit more in depth on the first aspect, which is the assessment tool. And this makes sense because it's where we begin as practitioners, and that is to say we collect information. We live in an age of information. The amount of information that we can collect is growing. And if we're really honest with ourselves about that process, it's complicated, it's difficult to some degree, and some data points are more meaningful than others. So how do we take all this information and personalize it for the care plan of our patient? Well, that's what the personalized assessment tool does. It is a very sophisticated platform that collects data from your patient. And there are two sources of information. One is self-report, so a qualitative survey. And this can take about 15 minutes for your patients to complete. It's incredibly thorough and quite accurate. And there's about 180 questions or so that are part of the survey that begin to look at the symptomatic dimensions of the patient's illness experience. It's extensive, but it's incredibly helpful. And we use it as a way of better identifying what are the systems that are most symptomatic, that are expressing the most imbalances in terms of how patients are feeling. But obviously, and for many of us, that's not enough. You know, we need more information than that. And so the system also aggregates objective data. These are the blood markers. It's a blood draw, essentially, that analyzes many assays or metabolites across the patient's physiologic spectrum. And those two data sets together are then run through the metabolic code assessment algorithm set. We have about 16,000 algorithms and 4,000 modifiers. And yes, you heard me correctly. There are thousands and thousands of decision points that this system weights, analyzes, correlates, and produces a assessment of where that person's metabolism is today. And for many of you who've seen myself and Jim Laval lecture, we organize it across what we call our triads. And these are really sort of a systems biology approach to how we look at physiology. and that is to say we don't want to look at a marker in isolation. We don't even want to look at a single body system in isolation. We want to look at a system of systems. And we know that there are certain processes in the body that are so tightly tied together that you really shouldn't look at them separately. And so we have these 5 domains or subsystems of the person's metabolism that begin to refine our understanding of where that individual is at. All of this is based on the most current evidence, and we use those algorithms to weight that evidence and better understand exactly where the greatest imbalances are within each of these 5 areas. And so you can see on this sample patient report the 5 domains or triads, and each domain is comprised of 3 elements, which is why they're called triads. The first triad, or T1, is composed of cortisol, thyroid, and insulin, the relationship between blood sugar, metabolism, and stress. The second triad is gut, immune, brain, and this has to do with the direct functional and anatomical relationships between the digestive tract, immune system, and the central and even peripheral nervous system and autonomic nervous system. The third is cardiopulmonary neurovascular. This is really the relationship between the brain and the heart. If you look at the area of neurocardiology, there's a very strong interdependence between the central nervous system and the heart and cardiovascular system. The fourth is liver, lymph, kidney, which are our drainage organs. So this has to do with our ability to sort of live safely in the world with respect to exposures and toxins and whether or not we can absorb and process and metabolize and eliminate them properly. And then the fifth are reproductive hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, which of course in our training we spend a lot of time looking at. So all of these areas together comprise the fundamental aspects of the patient's health. And what we do then is use the algorithms to rank order which triads are the most imbalanced, and that draws attention to where we begin with our treatment plan. We typically recommend that anything that has a total aggregate score of above 500, which is the aggregate of both the self-report and lab data, means that there's a serious or significant imbalance, and that's the triad or first 2 triads that you should really address. In this patient, it's adrenal, thyroid, pancreas, as well as cardiopulmonary neurovascular. So this is a patient who's probably overweight, under stress, hyperlipidemic, hypertensive, at risk for heart disease and diabetes. And all of us know this, as we look at our patients in our practices, when we see that cardiometabolic risk walk in the door, but this helps organize all that information, rank it, tell you where the imbalances are, and say, okay, this is where we should begin. So here we have part of the result of the report, and that is to say not just organizing the data and ranking it, but actually making suggestions to say, here are a variety of dietary supplements and herbs and other strategies to rebalance that disordered metabolism. And while the report will generate these recommendations, again, based on those algorithms, as the practitioner, you can select how many of the triads you want to address. In this patient's case, you can see if you look about halfway down or so, there's magnesium glycinate, and there's 5 little triangles there, which means that the magnesium has a direct impact on all 5 triads, which means that the report is generating recommendations across all 5. But you can select the first 2 that are imbalanced, triad 1 and triad 3, and pull out those particular supplements and say, patient so-and-so, I'd really like you to start with this subset of recommendations to really focus on those areas that are most imbalanced. And we spent a lot of time linking these metabolic disturbances to strategic recommendations, and we want to have the smallest list possible that does the most good for the individual. As you can imagine, that is an enormously complicated task from a programming and technology perspective, but the assessment tool is enormously complicated, but it's also quite vetted, it's very accurate, and what it does, obviously, is it takes a lot of information and it helps to organize it in a way where you now have a framework to understand what's going on with the patient, as well as a language and an approach to understand that patient, and a very clear path to restoring health in that individual. Now, we also know that it's not enough just to recommend dietary supplements. Even if you're incredibly precise and accurate in terms of the imbalances, you really also have to focus on their lifestyle issues too. And that means diet and exercise. So there's a second part of the program that Marta will discuss, which is the Lifestyle Guidance Portal. And what she's showing right now, if you just go back one slide, this is just one other element of the report for the patient, and that is for the first two triads that are the most imbalanced, it will have a deeper exposition or review in prose of all of the elements of that triad. So for this patient, they qualify for triad 1, so you're going to see printouts included in the report on adrenals, thyroid, and pancreas. It'll also, in this particular individual, include triad 3, so cardiopulmonary neurovascular. You can see there's some nice graphics, quite a lot of detail, and this is just one piece to that information puzzle. It turns out that the total report for that particular patient will on average be about 45 pages. So this report goes into great detail, layer after layer, looking at not just aggregate imbalances, but also subsections of the report on what were the results on just the biological markers, what were the results on just the survey, what were some general markers that we need to draw attention to, and then what's the plan. So that's how we get to the 45 pages. It's incredibly extensive, very information-rich. It's something that you can send your patients home with, and it's a roadmap, essentially, that they can understand and begin their journey back towards how